Welcome back to Preparing for Online Delivery. In this video, we'll be discussing ways to create a community while delivering your course online. I invite Luciano to get us started.
Thanks, Bree. Yes, creating community is quite important. Again, because we and our students are physically distant from each other, there's a tendency for us to become isolated. And that's one of the things that we really don't want to be happening in a course, especially in an online course, is to have students isolated. So there's some strategies we can use in order to foster that community building and foster opportunities for our students to engage with one another and to us as well. There's also some literature that suggests that engagement and that interaction is quite important. So creating that social presence among instructors and students, as we already talked about, but also allowing opportunities for students to interact with one another, to create that bonding, to create that community of learners that is so important in our face-to-face environments, but also important in an online environment as well. So I'll pass on to Patty, because I think a key aspect of this community of learners is to start with a good plan. So Patty, do you want to talk more about the planning for community engagement?
Thanks, Luciano. So the idea of having a communication plan for your students, I think it's important. You want it to be flexible enough so that you can respond on an as-needed basis, but you want to have a kind of a regular pattern or ritual to your communication with students. And I'll bring up something John talked about in the sessions on Blackboard. He talked about the idea of using the Blackboard communication tools to bookend a week. And I really like that phrase because it's sort of putting almost a hug, a virtual hug around the week. So you start off with, a welcome message each week, and here's where we're going. Here's the road we're taking this week, the virtual road we're taking. And then at the end of the week, oh look, this is where we've been, and next week this is where we're going again. And so that's one kind of little pattern that you can have as part of your communication plan for each week. And you can have particular pieces where you might respond to questions that are coming up, frequently asked questions. Maybe there's a little video that you do saying, gee, I've been getting lots of questions in the FAQ discussion board about this. Let me tell you a bit more. So having a bit of a plan about how you're beginning and ending the weeks, how you're going to respond to questions students have. Are you going to be doing that on a discussion forum or creating a friendly little video? Thinking about all those things in advance. And again, make it flexible enough so that if you do need to make some adjustments, you can do that. You're not tied to something, but that you've created a lovely pattern where students feel comfortable and know what to expect, and that kind of invite your students into the community. So I'll maybe ask John, since I quoted him a few times here, if he wanted to add anything to that.
Yes, Patty, I do, and thanks. So in my mind, when you're doing these bookends, and Patty calls them a virtual hug, but really what's a bookend? It's a support, and you're putting a support in place. But by doing that, you're being present. The students are actually seeing you be present in the course. You're being supportive in that presence, and you're helping students move along. And I probably said this before, and I'll probably keep saying it forever until I think differently. But in this online environment, really, you want to have that roadmap for success to your students. And that's part of that expectation setting around engagement and participating as well. Look, for you to be successful in this course, here's the recipe, right? And you put that out to them and just keep them motivated through every week. And that's the point to the bookend. There's so many ways you can build community in an online environment, and even leveraging Blackboard, surprisingly, like, whoever thought an LMS could do something like that. We always love to hate our LMS, right? No matter which one you have. But in Blackboard, maybe you want to group some students together to be like a little peer support structures or study structures, or maybe they'll do that organically on their own. But in my mind, in the online environment, because of the distance and the gaps, I think the more structure you bring to the table, the better it is for your students, as long as there's flexibility in that structure. You know, you're not dictating that, you know, you will be a community, you will get together and do this at this time, but just say, you know, get people to group together to be a support, a study partner. Maybe they're critical responders to each other. I think I made up a word there, responsters, but you know what I'm saying. So you want to get people engaged with each other as well, not just you as this hub and a bunch of spokes. You actually want to get to bring people in together, and so you know there's different ways we can do that, and I suggested a few there. But if my colleagues have other ideas, I'll throw it over to them.
Thanks, John. And again, like there are plenty of tools that we can use. Even synchronous sessions. Actually, that's one of the most important tool in our arsenal in order to create that that community. So if we can plan accordingly, we can tap on the affordances of those synchronous sessions that we can have with our students. One of the ways, and I think we already shared that in previous video, is to, instead of having all your students in all the sessions, you can break up your students to smaller groups. So instead of having, for instance, in my class I'm going to be teaching in the fall, I have 40 students, and I'm going to be meeting with them twice a week. So instead of meeting with all of those students twice a week, I can split them into groups of 10 and meet with them just once a week for half of the class time. And then I can give them the other half to do some activities. Maybe they can watch some other pre-recorded videos. So at that way, they're still taking up all the time that they should be taking in that week's worth of work. But I'm also allowing them to interact with a smaller group, but in a more meaningful way. So again, strategies we can use. You can also create icebreakers, especially at the beginning of the course. So, for instance, creating activities such as one of the ones that John shared in our sessions, hockey cards. You can ask your students to create some hockey cards where students outline their interests, where they're coming from, and what they can contribute to the conversation. And that already, from the first day of class, starts building that community where they start getting to know each other. Maybe a follow-up activity that taps on those expertise that they're bringing to the table can also solidify that, and then moving that along. As Patty mentioned, it's all about planning. So if in your course, creating, cultivating that community of learners is important, start from the get-go and then build that up front. Patty, over to you.
Oh, and just to add to that, because I think that little hockey card icebreaker is a favorite. I know a few instructors who have used that successfully. But one of the things is to model as well. You know, when you're doing those kinds of icebreaker activities, you know, start out with yourself. And I was talking just at the beginning of spring semester here, I was talking with a faculty member who talked about her introduction. She didn't do a hockey card activity, but she had an introductory discussion board, and she started it off, and she talked about some professional things, but a couple of personal interests, and just, you know, how things were a little bit different in this time of COVID. And she was just amazed at how the discussion forum took off and the students were responding to each other. So getting a nice start to your course, just as it is in a face-to-face class, can really provide some momentum in keeping that engagement and the community building throughout the whole course.
Right, and I would just like to kind of frame that activity a little more. And you know, we refer to this hockey card. So what's a hockey card? It's a picture of a player with their statistics on it, right? So really what we're asking is students to post a bit of a biography, a picture of themselves, or a picture, you know, maybe of them and their dog or something, and then some interest, something about them. And what you're modeling there, not only are you having an icebreaker activity that builds community at the beginning, but you're also getting students to actually engage a discussion board, to use the discussion board, and you're already kind of training your students right at the very beginning about how this course would work, and you're introducing them to a tool at the same time. So then the follow-up to that activity would be, after people post their bios, go and respond to 3 bios. Find something interesting, something in common, and something you never thought of, and go out and find 3 bios that meet that criteria, and then do a reply to that in the discussion board. So you're modeling many things. Students are getting exposed to different things. So you're really hitting a lot of points just in that one activity. And so I just wanted to leave that there, just kind of frame that activity a little more. But there's many icebreaker activities. On the pod site, we have the Topper resource that you can go to for icebreakers. And you can find one that resonates with you, or maybe you already know one that you've used that you can import into an online environment.
So just building off of John's kind of, I guess, wrapping up talking about the icebreaker piece, the other thing to kind of think about is around the end of the course. And sometimes when I've been working with faculty developing fully online courses, sometimes they'll just end with the last module, and then that's it. Students are kind of left hanging. They have an exam. But what's really nice is to make sure to plan some space at the end to reflect back on the journey you've taken together throughout the course, to give students a chance to reflect on their learnings. That may be done asynchronously, maybe a discussion board to wrap things up. It may be a synchronous session where everybody all comes together at the end and maybe shares a little bit of what what they're going to take away from the course. Maybe you do a little bit of both. But I think making sure that you kind of acknowledge the community that happened throughout the semester, and maybe that community will continue in some way as students move on throughout their career at Mount Royal, or maybe even when they graduate. You never know. And so making sure to make space at the end there. And I see a really nice symmetry there. We're talking the beginning and the end of every course, and then we also talked about the beginning and the end of every week. Sort of the beginning, you're talking about where we're going and what's expected. And then at the end, we're talking about, well, what have we done, and celebrating that. And maybe, if there's another week to follow, a little preview of where we're going. And at the end of the course, so the mirroring that. So there's a mirror here. There's the what's happening, beginning of the week, end of the week, beginning of the course, end of the course. At the end of the course, you can be saying now that you've done this course, where's this going to take you? Like, what implications is this going to have for your, practice, your professional practice, or, being a citizen in your environment? So I think making space for those pieces of community are really important, and it'll make sure that your course is something your students are going to take away with them for the rest of their lives.
Thanks, Patty. And again, like that opportunity for celebration of that learning experience that they all engage together. It's so crucial. And I really like that bookend of beginning the class and similar to a face-to-face class, where the first day of class is quite important, but also the final day of the class is quite important. So paying close attention to those beginning and ending parts of your online course can also become crucial in establishing and closing that community of learners, or continuing that for future semesters. So important tips there.
That wraps up this video on creating community. Thanks again to Luciano, Patty, and John. Be sure to join us for the next video where we discuss assessment and academic integrity. See you there.